Good afternoon and welcome everyone. Especially welcome here to this small venue far from the main venue. A large number of companies are moving to the cloud today thanks to the many benefits that the cloud provides: velocity, scalability, flexibility, and cost. Moving to the cloud is also an opportunity for traditional companies to rethink their processes and embrace a more DevOps agile culture. In the process of moving to the cloud, admins and security admins specifically also need to rethink how they manage their resources and how they manage security in the cloud. There are a number of questions that come up when new customers start in Google. But it all really boils down to one fundamental concern. How do I ensure that decisions I make today will help me scale and will not become an obstacle as my business grows? My name is Marco Cavalli, and I'm a product manager in cloud security at Google. In this session, we will take you through the journey of an imaginary new customer that starts and grows in Google Cloud. We will see the features and best practices to manage your resources and secure your resources as your complexity grows. Cyrus will join us, and he will demo how this feature look like in our console. And then finally, Lucas from the Broad Institute will come and show how a large enterprise manages thousands of resources for themselves and for their customers. This journey has 4 steps. We will start from the very beginning, and we will see the basic features that enable all the other security and control features in Google Cloud. Then we will see how to organize resource and how to help you scale your management capabilities as your business grows. Of course, security is top of mind for any customer. So we will look at the policies that help you control and ensure that your resources stay within your compliance requirements. And then finally, we will see how to leverage automation and a DevOps approach to manage resources at large scale. So let's start. Let's start from the beginning. And if you are a new customer that is joining Google Cloud, you will want to manage your users. You will want to manage how they authenticate into Google and into your application. Now, Cloud Identity is the solution to manage users and groups, but also to manage devices and applications in Google Cloud into one single console. Cloud Identity lets you create users and groups directly in Cloud Identity. But if you already have your own directory on-premise or in the cloud, you can easily federate your identities and maintain your existing solution as the single source of truth. We will not dive into Cloud Identity specifics here because there was a session yesterday, and it's linked here. If you missed it, you will be able to find it online. Just one note on Cloud Identity. Cloud Identity allows admins to set policies on users. Things like second factor authentication, security keys, and it enables single sign-on too. Now, as part of the sign-up process for Cloud Identity, we automatically provision the GCP organization for you. The GCP organization represents a customer in Google Cloud, and it's identified by the company's domain. All the resources that belong to a company are stored under the organization resource. That provides 2 fundamental benefits that are relevant to all enterprise customers. One is centralized visibility and control. So as the central administrator, you are able to see and apply policy and control all the resources that belong to your company. The second benefit is ownership. So if a user that created a project leaves your company, that project will continue to belong to the company because it's part of the organization resource. The organization is linked to the Cloud Identity account, which provides identity management, and we said, but it also provides a recovery mechanism in case something goes wrong. The link between Cloud Identity and the GCP organization ensures that whenever a user in your domain creates a resource, that resource automatically, by default, belongs to the organization resource. That means it is subject to the company policies. And this helps you prevent things like rogue admins or shadow IT. Billing accounts, which are obviously very important because they are responsible for cost, they can also be part of the organization. And as such, they are subject to the policies that, for example, determine who can open billing accounts in an organization. So organization and cloud identities are the key features that help you start and grow in Google Cloud. So now let's see how do we build on top and how do we leverage other features to help you organize resources so that you can model your internal structure into Google Cloud. The organization that we just talked about is the root of the resource hierarchy, which includes folders and projects. These are containers for resources. And companies, large companies especially, use them to model departments or teams or subsidiaries. You can use folders to create boundaries and separation between different entities in your organization, so that users in that entity, in that department, can operate only within the boundaries that are allocated to them. In this example, mycompany.com has created 3 folders, one for IT, one for engineering, one for R&D. And folders can be nested so that each individual team can then organize resources within their domain according to criteria such as environment or team or application. Folders help you scale in 2 ways. They enable delegation and autonomy. As the central administrator, you can delegate responsibility for the, say, IT department to the IT person so that they can own and manage their resources independently. This way, they don't need to go and bug the central admin every time they need to spin up a new VM. At the same time, as the central admin, you still maintain visibility thanks to the roles that are assigned at the organization level, and we will talk about that in a second. The second way folders help you scale is through policy inheritance. Every node in the hierarchy is an attach point for a policy, such as access control or organization policies, as we'll see. And those policies are inherited down the tree. So whenever a team creates a project in the, say, IT department folder, that project will inherit automatically all the policies that are defined at the folder level. This way, you don't need to set policies on each resource individually. We mentioned billing accounts, and billing accounts can be part of the organization like any other resource. There are dedicated IAM roles to control billing accounts. Most commonly, companies only have a few selected individuals who can open billing accounts, and mostly from the finance department. Billing accounts are linked to projects, and the link determines the pays for relationship. So the billing account pays for the project, which includes resources that generate usage. Most commonly, companies tend to have one central billing account, and they receive one monthly invoice from Google. The billing account pays for all the resources in the organization. Then they use labels to break down usage and cost and to do internal chargebacks. So labels are an additional organizational construct in Google Cloud that helps you add custom metadata to resources, to any resource in cloud. And users mostly use them to add metadata for like tracking or reporting purposes. But the biggest use case for labels is really cost allocation. So you can break down cost based on criteria that are customized by the customer. So how does that work? That works because labels are exported to BigQuery together with the corresponding resources and their usage and their cost. So in this example here, we have 2 virtual machines in a project, and they have 2 labels. One is a cost center label. The other one is a component equal backend type of label. So both labels are exported to BigQuery, and then you can do grouping, and you can do cost allocation based on criteria defined by your labels. Like you can find out how much your front end or back end cost, or how much you need to charge back to cost center X. So we talked about how to get started, and we saw briefly the main components that help you organize resources and manage as you scale. So now, let's look at what are the policies that help you control your resources. When we talk about policies, there is one thing that comes to mind immediately, and how do I ensure that the right users have access to the right resources? Or in other words, how do I prevent unauthorized access? So identity and access management are the policies, or is the policy, that help you define who can do what on which resources, under which conditions. So IAM conditions have been announced today, and they're going to be in private beta very soon. So IAM policies have three fundamental components. They have identities on one side. These are the users or the groups that you need to grant access to. Then there are resources. We saw resources on the other side. They are organized hierarchically, and these are the target of the policy. In the middle, you have the policy that connects the two, and the IAM policy is built on roles. Roles are collections of fine-grained permissions that allow or enable users to perform some meaningful task. In this example here, we want to grant Sam at mycompany.com the ability to manage all the instances within the R&D folder. So how do we do that? We grant Sam the instance admin role on the R&D folder. Now, because IAM policies are inherited, Sam will be able to manage all the VMs under that folder, and if there are subfolders, throughout the subtree under the R&D folder. Now, we have provisioned about 250 predefined roles, following the principle of least privilege. So we want you to be able to enable your users to do their job without exposing them to too much privilege or too many permissions, which can become dangerous and hard to control. Another example of a narrower role that follows the principle of least privilege is, suppose we want to grant Sam the ability to only do debugging in a project, but nothing else. We don't want to expose Sam to some private information or sensitive data. Well, we can give Sam the log admin viewer in the project, so he will only be able to see logs in that project. Even though we support 250 predefined roles, customers always need the ability to do something a little bit different or something that is tailored to specific needs. So we also support customized roles. And custom roles allow you to pick and choose permissions individually and create a role that meets your requirements. So I introduced IAM conditions. I said that IAM conditions are going to be private beta very soon. And here there's a link for you to sign up if you are interested. IAM conditions are an additional knob that allows you to control fine-grained access at a fine-grained level. We currently support 3 types of conditions. Conditions that allow you to discriminate access at a sub-project level. So you can, for example, give access to users only to a subset of the VMs in a project based on the name prefix on those VMs. The second use for conditions is to discriminate whether a user is accessing your data from a corporate network as opposed to a public network in a cafe. This allows admins to assess the risk level of the user in that context at that specific time. So if a user is accessing your resources from a cafe, he may not be able to access sensitive data that he would be able to access if he were accessing from the corporate network. And the last use case, or the last type of conditions we support, is our time window or time-based conditions. So you grant access to users only within a certain window. So in this example here, suppose we have a project, it's a production project, and it has an issue. So we want to enable the SRE team to go and fix the problem, but we want to allow them to do their job only until July 27. So to do that, we grant the SRE team the instance admin role again on that project, but only with time less than July 27. And after July 27, the access will be automatically revoked. So we talked about access control, and access control defines policies that affect users and how users can operate within the organization. But as a company, you probably want to have some sort of standardization across your entire company. So you want to define guardrails so the users can move freely and quickly within the boundaries that you assign so that they don't risk like going out of compliance. This is where organization policy comes to help. Organization policy defines boundaries or constraints around resources and how they can be used. And we'll see the kind of organization policies we support. Organization policies are also inherited down the hierarchy. And unlike IAM, you can set exceptions or override the default policy. So this diagram shows how the inheritance model works. You have a generic policy here that's red and green at the organization level, and that means it applies everywhere across the organization. Now, you may be able to set exceptions on a test folder and relax the default policy by enabling the blue part 2. Or you, on a production project, you may want to restrict that default policy by removing some of those, say, images or APIs. You can also override the policy entirely and define a policy on a specific node. Now, in order to do that, in order to be able to set exceptions on a policy, you need to have an organization level permission so that the project owner cannot set exceptions for themselves. So again, we want to ensure that centralized visibility and control remain intact. So we support currently a number of policies. I will only highlight a few that I think are what we see customers using the most. For example, customers most likely want to restrict access to their VMs from external IPs. Or you may want to define a set of images that your users can use to boot up VMs, but only those images, so that users cannot go and spin up VMs using some random image that has not been approved, that may have security bugs, and so on. And finally, something we just launched in beta is domain-restricted sharing. So the ability for the admin to say, nobody else from outside my domain can access my resources. Now, because this is a policy, it's inherited and it supports exceptions. If you have a project that is a joint development with a trusted partner, then you can set an exception and you can whitelist that domain as a trusted domain and allow them to work on the joint project. Okay, so we saw the organizational construct and we saw the policies. Now let's look at how can we rely on automation and a DevOps approach to manage resources at scale. When you're dealing with thousands of resources, manually provisioning them and individually configuring them not only is not practical, but it's also error-prone. You risk ending up with lots of unique snowflakes that are hard to control and may affect your security posture. At the very least, your visibility onto your resources will be reduced. So as a security admin, not knowing what you don't know is a very uncomfortable place to be. When operating infrastructure at large scale, automation and standardizations are key requirements. Automation helps speed things up so you can provision resources quickly, but also it enforces that level of standardization that you need to ensure and to meet your compliance and security requirements. So at Google, we treat infrastructure and configurations as code. We use templates to define how our resources and our policies look like, and then we use automation to deploy them into the cloud. This is available to all customers today. Customers can define their templates, and they can save their templates in a source of truth like Git. They can use Git, they can use standard CI/CD type of pipelines to have submit changes and to have approval workflows. And then they can deploy those resources and that infrastructure into the cloud using Deployment Manager, which is the Google fully managed service to handle automation. Or you can use open source solutions like Terraform. Once all your resources have been provisioned and they reflect your intent, well, nothing guarantees that those resources will not evolve over time and they will not deviate from your original intention. So how do you ensure that your security posture doesn't go off the rails over time? This is a tough problem, mostly because customers and different companies have different requirements and they see the solution differently. So Google has a strong tradition in open source. And we thought open source would be the best way to approach this problem. And for this, we have sponsored Forseti Security, which is an open source tool available to everyone that has been developed by Google with a set of customers and a set of partners. Now, Forseti does 4 things for you. It creates an inventory of all your resources, so you can and all your policies, so you can see exactly what is going on in your cloud presence. And then it helps you scan, so you can find when there are violations, when some resources or some policies or configs have deviated from your original intent. And then you can use Forseti to bring back resources into the compliance that you want. Or you can go and submit changes into your original policies if you realize that that's actually a better place to be. So the last thing Forseti helps you do, it provides you information about your resources and about policies, or like why somebody has access to some resources, where is it coming from, or why certain things can be done or cannot be done. So this level of insights help you manage and control your resources more accurately. So we have seen all the basic blocks. We have seen the features that help you control, scale, and manage your resources as you grow. Now I'd like to invite Cyrus on stage, and he will give you a demo of how these features look into our console.
Thank you, Marco. Hi, everyone. I'm Cyrus. I'm a software engineer on Google Cloud. Today, I want to show you 3 things you can do as you're getting started to secure your organization and set yourself up for scale. So let's get this demo going over here. If you could switch over to the demo, please. All right. So to get us started, I went ahead and I set up an organization. And this is a fictional organization. You can see up here at the top is the domain name. And we've got 2 folders in this organization, one for my engineering team, one for my people operations team. We've got a few projects that I've went ahead and organized into the folders for us. And I'm going to use this to demonstrate these 3 things you could do to get started. So the first thing is to use groups in your IAM policies rather than granting individual users roles. Now, why might you want to do this? Well, it helps you scale. So what you should do is define groups that map to functions or roles within your organization and use those roles in the IAM policies. So let me give you an example here. So let's take a look at the IAM policy for my organization. So I've actually created a role for all of my cloud admins. So I'm going to go ahead and grant that role to the group. Grant the organization admin role to this group. Scroll on down here and grant the organization admin role. Now, I'm also one of the admins. I'm a member of that group. But the nice thing about this is, as we grow as an organization, as I bring on more cloud administrators, I just add them to the group, and they'll get all the permissions they need to perform their job. So that's the first way that you can scale, is use groups instead of granting individuals access to your resources. Now, the second thing you can do is, like Marco was saying, leverage the principle of least privilege. And this basically means grant your users the least permissions they need to do their job. If they need additional permissions, you can grant that on an as-needed basis, maybe using IAM conditions to time limit that. So to illustrate that, before I give you an example, I want to tell you that there's actually 2 ways that you can apply the principle of least privilege inside the Google Cloud Platform. The first is using IAM roles, as Marco mentioned. So the obvious example here is with my organization admin. You can see that I'm an organization admin. I don't need to be. I'm using a group, so I'll remove that. The second thing is I granted myself the folder admin role. That was just to set up the folders to get myself organized. I don't need to manage folders anymore. If I need to add more folders in the future, I'm an organization admin. I can add myself back and grant that role as needed. So I'm going to remove the folder admin role for myself. So that's the first way, is use the finest grained roles you can to implement the principle of least privilege. The second way is, in addition to limiting the permissions you have, you can also limit the resources over which you have those permissions by leveraging the resource hierarchy. So to demonstrate that, I have my engineering folder here, and I actually have a team of administrators inside the engineering team, and they want to manage their own folder. Now, rather than granting them the folder administrator role up here at the org level, I actually want to do it at the engineering folder level. So let me take a look at the engineering folders IAM policy. And I want to grant that group, I want to grant the engineering admins the folder admin role just for this folder. Now what that does is it ensures that they only have permission to administer this one folder and not any of the other folders inside the organization. So let's grant them the folder admin role. So now my admins have administrative rights over this folder, but not over the people ops folder, and not under any other folders that might be created inside my org in the future. Now, the third thing that you can do to secure your organization and really set yourself up for scale is to empower your users by setting guardrails. The way I'm going to demonstrate that is by taking a look at my engineering team. Now, what I want my engineering team to be able to do is use cloud without, in an unfettered way. So I want them to be able to create projects. If they need to use any billable resources, I want them to have a billing account accessible to them. But I want to have some control. So the way that I get that control is by actually putting guardrails around where they can create projects and which billing accounts they can use. So let's start with the first part of that. Let's get some controls over where the engineers can create projects. So again, looking at the IAM policy for the engineering folder, I'm going to go ahead and use this folder for my engineering team, and I want them to be able to create projects in here. So I will grant the engineering team the project creator role. Scroll down here. And I also want them to be able to see this folder, so I'll grant them the folder viewer role. Back up to add. All right. So at this point, my engineers can create projects inside this folder. Now, when we provision a new organization, we actually, to make things easy for you, we grant the whole domain permission to create projects. Let me show you how that works. So if we look at the IAM policy for the organization, scroll down here, you'll see that there's a project creator grant, and it's granted to the whole domain. Now, like I said, I wanted to lock down project creation for my eng team and make sure that they were only creating projects in the engineering folder. So this kind of defeats my purpose. So I'm going to remove this grant. And there's one thing you should know about removing this grant. It means that only your users that have been explicitly given permission to create projects somewhere in your organization will be able to create projects. Anyone who hasn't been given permission won't be able to. So for example, right now, my engineering team should be able to create projects only in the engineering folder. But anyone in the people ops org won't be able to create projects unless I explicitly give them permission. So you'll want to use that with some care. So now we've got things set up for project creation. Our engineering team has a folder that they can see and they can create projects in, and they can't create projects anywhere else. Now let's address the billing side of the picture. So as Marco mentioned, typically billing is administered by a totally different team. And what I want to make sure is that that team is the only team that can set up new billing accounts and can administer them. So I have a group set up for that, the finance team. And so I'll go ahead and grant them permission to both create new billing accounts and to administer all the billing accounts inside the org. Now you'll notice that there is another default that we set when we provision the organization for you, and that's here under the billing account creator role. Here we have, again, the entire domain given permission to create billing accounts. In this case, I definitely want to lock this down. I only want my finance team to be able to create new accounts. So I'll go ahead and remove that grant. So at this point, now my finance team is the only team that can create new billing accounts. My developers won't be able to create new ones. And they'll also be able to administer, the finance team will be able to administer all the billing accounts. Now, at this point, because my engineering team is not the administrator of any accounts, they don't have any accounts they can use. We need to fix that problem. So let's switch over to the billing view and take a look. So we've got a billing account that we intend to use for all of our engineering projects. So let's take a look at the IAM policy for that. What you'll see here is that I am the admin. I'm on this account just because I created it. I could remove that. And my finance team has access inherited through the organization. Now I want my engineering team to be able to use this billing account. So what I'm going to do is, again, using a group, grant the team permission to only use this account. And the way that you do that is by using the billing account user role. And what this role does is it gives you permission to use the account, basically to create that pays for linkage that Marco was talking about, without being able to change any settings on the account itself. So we'll go ahead and grant that to our engineering team. So at this point, assuming I've done everything right and the demo gods are smiling down on us, if we take a look from an engineer's perspective, we should have the guardrails we need. So let's see what that looks like. So over here, I'm logged in as one of the engineers on the Eng team. I'm going to go ahead and refresh this view to see how things have changed. So the first thing that you'll see is suddenly there's a view of the hierarchy, because we're now organized into a hierarchy. They can see the organization. They can see the engineering folder, but they don't see the people ops folder. So that part's working great. So we've created that guardrail. Now let's see what the experience is like when they try to create a project. So just type in a project name here. And now let's look at the location. This is the key piece. So here we need to have a place where the project will be created, either under an organization or in the folder. So here are the options that are available to the engineer. You'll note that they can actually see the org. Let's see what happens if we select it. You'll get a message saying that you don't actually have permission to create projects here. So that's working well. Can they create projects in the engineering folder? Yes. So that's locked down exactly like we want. So go ahead and create that project. In the meantime, let me take a look at the billing setup. So I'll just pick one of the projects we've got here. And let's switch over to the billing page. And let's see what the experience would be like to set up billing for this project. So the engineer would link to a billing account. Oh, demo god's not happy. Give that a quick refresh. All right, we'll give it one last try. There's a bit of caching that goes on inside the console. All right, so if this was working correctly, what you would see here is the only option available to the engineer would be the engineering billing account, and the engineer could select it and use that for billing. Just for giggles, I'll give it one more shot. There you go. So now you can see here that the engineering billing account is available, and the engineer can set it as their account. So just to recap, 3 things you can do as you're getting started to secure your organization and set yourself up for scale. First, use groups instead of granting individuals access to your resources in IAM policies. 2, try to use the principle of least privilege, leveraging both IAM roles and the resource hierarchy. And 3, set guardrails for your users so that you can empower them to do their job. So now if we can switch back to the slides. Switch back to the slides, please. I'd like to welcome up Lucas Carlson from the Broad Institute, and he's going to be telling us more about how he handles scale at his company.
Thank you very much, Cyrus. We're running a little low on time here, so I'm going to blaze through some of these slides. I am Lucas Carlson. I work at the Broad. I've been there for quite some time, and I'm responsible for our cloud environment as well as for supporting developers in their use of cloud services. The Broad's a genomic research facility in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and we're organized around this idea of research areas where it's pure research and sort of production services or facilities where we provide a service for a fee. So in the case of cancer, we're just researching cancer, learning about different kinds of cancers and different therapeutics for cancers. And for example, the genomics platform provides services around sequencing DNA, analyzing DNA, extracting and storing DNA. We're funded from a variety of different ways, including government grants, philanthropic donations, and licensing for various inventions and software products that we have. And this is important because it answers why we have such a complicated billing environment. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the scale. One of the things I like to talk about a lot is scale, and I want to make people sort of understand what I mean by that. So we have lots of basically all the things that Marco and Cyrus have been talking about. We have 7 different G Suite domains. I'll go into briefly why we have that. Thousands of G Suite users, thousands of Google groups. We have 4 organizations in GCP. In there we have almost 200 folders. And amongst those folders, there's over 7,000 projects. This one tidbit is wrong here. I learned recently we have 380,000 buckets because there was a project that apparently has quite a few that we weren't counting. And amongst all those buckets, we have over 35, nearly 40 petabytes of data. As Marco described, we have one master billing account. It's a monthly billing account. We get billed with an invoice, and then we pay it, at the end of the month with a 30-day net. But we have 175 what's called sub-accounts, and this is a construct most of you won't get involved with. It's really focused on the reseller community, so we act like a reseller where we procure the services from Google and we resell them to internal funding sources, which represent those cost objects and other things I've been talking about. And what's nice about the sub-account model is the bill that we get has a total at the bottom, but it has 175 subtotals. So it makes it very easy to figure out what component of our overall bill was done by each of the different organizations. So why do we have so many domains? Well, some of them are dev and test, understandably, but we have our main production domain is broadinstitute.org, and we use that for all of our users. That's our email. That's when users go to do things, they're doing them in that particular organization. We also created a nonprofit domain because we have a lot of the users in our domain are not employees of our company, and so we didn't necessarily want to pay full price for all of their accounts. So we have a separate domain where we can create sort of collaborator users that are in our environment, but they're not in our primary domain. And then we also have a cloud service that we've developed called FireCloud, where researchers around the world can come and bring their data and do genomic analysis in the cloud. And that system runs on Google, and it creates projects as one of the constructs. And so one of the issues we had here is in order for them to create groups and projects and users, they needed a service account that has basically root credentials in the domain. And so we didn't want this team building a public software product to have credentials in the Broad Institute's primary domain. So they have their own domain, and they have root credentials and create things in there without disrupting the security of our primary domain. So let's see, what's important here is that most of our users are actually not employees. So we have around 1,300 or 1,400 employees, and those are the ones we give full enterprise Google accounts to. And then there's like 3,600 or more other people who are not employees, but we give them accounts as well. The nice thing about the way we have things set up is it's pretty much all automated. So users get created in Workday, and there's a feed that comes over that populates an LDAP server, and then the G Suite or Google Cloud Directory sync provisions all the users automatically. So that's very nice. We also have quite a few Google groups, and the way we deal with this is that in our ServiceNow environment that we use for tickets and a lot of IT stuff, we have a automated provisioning system where users can go in and actually request Google groups directly from there. As I mentioned, we have a bunch of G Suite orgs, and for each of those, there's a corresponding organization in GCP, and I'm going to show you shortly how we manage those. And the folder structure that I'm about to show you is organized in several different ways depending on our needs. Sometimes we organize around billing accounts, which is sort of the primary model, but we also do group-based folders and subfolders and teams, and we also do things like you might have a folder for production and a folder for development, for example. And I've already talked a little bit about the billing accounts, so I'm going to switch over this. Just to give you an idea of what all these projects are, a majority of them are active, but at any given moment, there's hundreds that are deleted and soon to be destroyed. In our primary org, where actually humans make projects because they have something they want to work on in the cloud, we have on the order of 800 or 900 projects, and we've been using GCP for about 4 years. So that's sort of what we've accumulated over that time. And then in the FireCloud environment, where customers who are using FireCloud have projects created on their behalf, there's literally thousands and thousands of projects in there. We're a complicated environment, so of these 7,000 projects, 4,000 of them we pay for. There's 1,000 of them that are actually being paid for by other organizations who use FireCloud and have their own billing accounts. And then there's a bunch that don't have any billing, and we use those for service accounts and to enable certain free APIs and that sort of thing. So talk about some of the tools we use to manage this. I already mentioned the Google Cloud Directory Sync, which used to be called the Google Apps Directory Sync. And that's how we provision all the users. We also have Active Directory, so one of the things that's important is keeping things in sync. So the same users exist in Active Directory and in Google. Everyone has accounts in both. And we use the G Suite password sync so that when users change their password in Active Directory, it changes the password in Google as well. So that way, they have the sense of it being single sign-on, and when in reality, there are 2 separate accounts. They're in 2 separate environments. They just happen to have the same ID and credentials at all times. And we do use one important custom role. It is very similar to what Marco was talking about. You know, we really want to restrict who can create these billing accounts. There's only one person in procurement who can create them. And so there's one person that has this custom role we've created called Procurement Admin. And the role gives him the ability to create new billing accounts. It gives him the ability to control who has access to all those billing accounts by adding and removing admins and users. And in addition, he has a role called Project Billing Manager, which is what allows him to change which billing account a project is associated with. So in that respect, Stuart, who has the Procurement Admin role, he can do anything with regards to billing on these projects. We also use resource labels. We used to use them for the billing, to control the billing, but it turns out that if you create a project and give it a cost object label, and then the owner of the project changes or removes that label, then when you look at the bill, you can't figure out how to bill it. So for us, at the moment, billing accounts have been a better model, but in the future, I think there's other things coming that will make that easier to do without having so many different billing accounts. So now I'm going to do a little demo of our console and kind of show you what it looks like if we switch over to the demo computer here. Okay, so you've seen this already with Cyrus's example, but I'll show you just a little bit what it looks like when you have a lot of stuff. So in this drop-down here, I have a bunch of different GCP organizations that I can look at. We're looking at the main Broad organization here. I'm in the IT department. We're called BITS, the Broad IT Services. And so we are using a lot of GCP. And so we have a sort of an in-depth structure here. We have this one billing account that we use a lot, and underneath it, there's lots of folders for the different teams in IT, and there's a bunch of things that are not really in a folder yet. This allows us to have a lot of different controls. So for example, the director of IT can have a certain level of access at the top level folder, and no matter what we do inside there, who creates projects, what else they're doing, that person who has access at that level has access to everything underneath there. Another thing, strategy that we have here is these billing account folders are really important because when you are the owner of a billing account and you grant someone in your team access to create projects on your billing account, that does not imply that you have any access to those projects. So you find yourself in the situation where you're literally paying for all these projects that people who work for you have created, and you don't have access to see what's in them or what they're doing, and that can be pretty frustrating if you're responsible for the billing. So we tend to put projects into folders related to the billing account and then grant the billing account admin let's say, viewer access or even potentially owner access to all the projects in those folders. That way, when their users create new projects, the billing account administrator automatically has the correct level of access to those projects. I'll show you a little bit what the billing accounts look like here. We have two, oh, this is not even an organization. Let me go into the correct organization. So we have two billing accounts. One is our main invoice billing account that we actually use, and one is a credit card account that we considered using at some point. There was some reason why they wanted to move to the Amex card, but we've found that there's many reasons why that's not going to be good for us, so we stick with the normal invoiced bill. This is a thing most of you won't see unless you're a reseller, but we have this concept of sub-accounts. So when I open that, I can see all the many different billing accounts that we have. And you can see here kind of how they're being used. This top one is paying for almost 4,000 projects. And then this is my billing account here where I have about 80 active projects that are being paid for today. Now, I mentioned the custom roles, so I can show you, for example, if we look at the org here, we can see there's many different roles that have some level of access at the top of the org. But we have this procurement admin role, and basically there's a demo that I did yesterday for another talk where I wrote an app that sort of does most of Stuart's job for him, which he will be using soon. And then you see Stuart has the access here as well. And so he's basically the only person that can do those things. Now, mostly we're still using the org as we were initially, but there's a lot of plans that we have, I think, for going forward. For example, right now, today, we're still in a state where any user who anyone can create a project in our org. You can only add it to billing if you have the right level of access on a billing account. But all of the projects can be created at the top level today. So we're not forcing people to create them in a subfolder, which is what we ultimately want to do. I think the idea there is we will get to the point where we'll have the right controls in place, so new projects that get created by people who don't quite know where they're supposed to go or what they're doing will start with a very limited set of permissions. For example, there's IAM org policy that you can apply where you can disallow the enabling of certain APIs. So we may have folders where projects get created by default where there's very limited access, and then users have to actually get billing, and they have to get their project into the correct folder before they can do all the things that they want to do. So that is pretty much my demo of the console here. And I think we're going to switch back to Marco now and to the slides.
Thank you, Lucas. So this brings us to the end of our talk. Lucas has shown how the features that we presented through the presentation help them manage lots of resources. You have seen thousands of projects in their organization for themselves, but also for their customers that build things through their APIs and their proprietary data. So in these presentations, we have walked through the journey of a company that starts and grows, and we have seen how the different features can be used to take you to the final results of the Broad Institute. These are the questions that we started from, and in the presentation we addressed them and saw how the different features can help you. So we are pretty much out of time, but if you have any questions, we'll be here, and you're more than welcome to come and talk to us. Thank you.